Question 1. Which approach would be most appropriate for a Wanhua Chemical employee to take when discovering potential environmental noncompliance during the negotiation of a significant new contract, which could impact the project's feasibility and Wanhua Chemical's regulatory standing? Option A. Discreetly investigate the environmental concerns independently, hoping to resolve them without involving senior management or the client. Option B. Immediately halt contract negotiations and inform senior management of the potential environmental noncompliance, requesting expert consultation to assess and rectify the issues before proceeding. Option C. Proceed with the contract negotiations as planned, assuming the environmental concerns are minor and will be addressed after the contract is secured. Option D. Downplay the significance of the environmental concerns to the client to ensure the contract is finalized quickly. Correct answer is B. Immediately halt contract negotiations and inform senior management of the potential environmental noncompliance, requesting expert consultation to assess and rectify the issues before proceeding. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Wanhua Chemical employee due to the inherent conflict between achieving business objectives and adhering to ethical and regulatory standards. The pressure to secure a significant contract can lead to a temptation to overlook or downplay potential compliance issues, requiring careful judgment to balance commercial interests with legal and ethical obligations. The correct approach involves proactively identifying and addressing potential regulatory noncompliance before it escalates. This demonstrates a commitment to Wanhua Chemical's integrity and adherence to the Wanhua Chemical Hiring Assessment Test's implied regulatory framework, which would prioritize lawful business conduct and responsible corporate citizenship. By seeking expert advice and implementing corrective measures, the employee upholds the company's reputation and avoids future legal repercussions. This aligns with best practices in corporate governance and risk management, ensuring that business growth is sustainable and ethically sound. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with the contract without fully investigating the environmental concerns would be a significant regulatory failure. This would violate principles of environmental protection and potentially contravene specific environmental regulations that Wanhua Chemical is expected to comply with, even if not explicitly detailed in the exam's framework. Such an action could lead to substantial fines, reputational damage, and operational disruptions. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the concerns and hope they are not discovered, represents a failure in due diligence and ethical conduct. This passive approach not only risks regulatory penalties, but also undermines the trust placed in the employee by Wanhua Chemical and its stakeholders. It demonstrates a disregard for the company's commitment to responsible operations. Finally, an approach that involves attempting to conceal or misrepresent the environmental issues to the client would be a severe ethical and potentially legal breach. This would violate principles of transparency and honesty, damaging Wanhua Chemical's credibility and exposing the company to severe legal consequences, including fraud charges. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical considerations and regulatory compliance. This involves a thorough understanding of applicable laws and company policies, a commitment to transparency, and a willingness to seek expert advice when faced with uncertainty or potential conflicts. When faced with a situation like this, a professional should 1. Identify the potential issue and its implications. 2. Consult relevant internal policies and external regulations. 3. Seek guidance from legal, compliance, or environmental experts within Wanhua Chemical. 4. Document all steps taken and decisions made. 5. Implement necessary corrective actions to ensure compliance and mitigate risks. Question 2. Implementation of Wanhua Chemical's supplier relationship management policy requires employees to exercise careful judgment when offered gifts. An employee is offered a high-value, bespoke item by a key supplier who is currently in the final stages of a significant contract negotiation with Wanhua Chemical. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the employee? Option A. Accept the gift and discreetly inform the supplier that Wanhua Chemical values their business relationship. Option B. Accept the gift, as it is a gesture of goodwill from a valued supplier, and assume it will not influence any business decisions. Option C. Accept the gift and plan to declare it to management at a later date, once the contract negotiations are concluded. Option D. Politely decline the gift, citing Wanhua Chemical's policy on gifts and hospitality. and inform the supplier that such items could create a perception of impropriety during ongoing negotiations. The correct answer is D. Politely decline the gift, citing Wanhua Chemicals' policy on gifts and hospitality, and inform the supplier that such items could create a perception of impropriety during ongoing negotiations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Wanhua Chemical employees regarding the ethical and regulatory implications of accepting gifts from suppliers. The core challenge lies in balancing normal business courtesies with the potential for undue influence, conflicts of interest, and breaches of anti-bribery and corruption regulations. Employees must exercise sound judgment to distinguish between appropriate gestures of goodwill and actions that could compromise Wanhua Chemicals' integrity and compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves adhering strictly to Wanhua Chemicals' internal gift and hospitality policy, which is designed to align with relevant anti-bribery and corruption laws. This policy likely mandates that gifts must be of nominal value, infrequent, and transparently declared. Accepting a gift that is modest, infrequent, and does not create an obligation or appear to influence business decisions aligns with the principle of maintaining ethical business conduct and avoiding even the appearance of impropriety. This approach ensures compliance with Wanhua Chemicals' commitment to integrity and adherence to regulatory frameworks that prohibit bribery and corruption. Incorrect approaches analysis. Accepting a gift of significant value, regardless of its frequency, poses a substantial risk. Such a gift can be perceived as an attempt to influence business decisions, creating a conflict of interest and potentially violating anti-bribery laws. The sheer value can override any argument of it being a token of appreciation. Accepting a gift that is frequent, even if of nominal value, can also be problematic. Pattern of receiving gifts, however small, can establish an implicit expectation of preferential treatment or create a perception of favoritism, thereby undermining fair competition and Wanhua Chemicals' reputation. This can also be seen as a way to circumvent stricter gift policies through accumulation. Accepting a gift that is directly tied to a specific ongoing or upcoming business negotiation or decision is a clear ethical and regulatory red flag. This creates a direct conflict of interest, as the employee's judgment could be compromised by the perceived obligation to the supplier who provided the gift. This approach directly contravenes the spirit and letter of anti-bribery legislation. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Wanhua Chemical should adopt a decision-making process that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Understanding and internalizing Wanhua Chemical's gift and hospitality policy. 2. Evaluating any offer of a gift against the policy's criteria for value, frequency, and context. 3. Considering the potential perception of the gift by colleagues, competitors, and the public. 4. If in doubt, always err on the side of caution and seek guidance from the compliance department or legal counsel. 5. Prioritizing the company's reputation and long-term business relationships over short-term perceived benefits. Question 3. Process analysis reveals that Wanhua Chemical is facing increasing scrutiny regarding the environmental impact of its raw material sourcing. Some key suppliers are operating with outdated environmental controls that may not meet current or anticipated regulatory standards. Which of the following approaches best balances Wanhua Chemical's operational efficiency with its ethical and regulatory responsibilities concerning its supply chain? Option A. Implement a policy of requiring suppliers to self-certify their environmental compliance annually without any independent verification or engagement from Wanhua Chemical. Option B. Focus solely on securing the lowest-cost raw materials, assuming that suppliers are entirely responsible for their own environmental compliance and that Wanhua Chemical bears no indirect responsibility. Option C. Immediately terminate contracts with any supplier whose environmental practices are not demonstrably compliant with the strictest interpretation of current regulations, regardless of their willingness or ability to adapt. Option D. Proactively collaborate with key suppliers to assess their environmental practices, identify areas for improvement, and develop a phased plan for enhanced compliance and sustainability, offering support where feasible. The correct answer is D. Proactively collaborate with key suppliers to assess their environmental practices, identify areas for improvement, and develop a phased plan for enhanced compliance and sustainability, offering support where feasible. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate financial interests of Wanhua Chemical with the long-term sustainability and ethical considerations of its supply chain partners, particularly in the context of evolving environmental regulations. The pressure to maintain cost-effectiveness can conflict with the imperative to ensure responsible sourcing and compliance. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing demands without compromising Wanhua Chemical's reputation or its commitment to regulatory adherence. The correct approach involves proactively engaging with suppliers to understand their current environmental practices and collaboratively developing a roadmap for improvement that aligns with Wanhua Chemical's sustainability goals and relevant regulations. This demonstrates a commitment to responsible supply chain management, which is increasingly expected by stakeholders and regulators. It fosters stronger, more resilient supplier relationships and mitigates the risk of future disruptions due to non-compliance. This approach is justified by the principles of corporate social responsibility and the implicit expectation within the chemical industry to operate sustainably and ethically, which is often reflected in industry best practices and emerging regulatory trends, even if not explicitly codified in every specific regulation at this moment. An approach that focuses solely on immediate cost reduction without considering the environmental impact of suppliers is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for the potential reputational damage and regulatory risks associated with an unsustainable supply chain. It also neglects the ethical obligation to ensure that Wanhua Chemical is not indirectly contributing to environmental harm. Another incorrect approach would be to unilaterally impose stringent environmental standards on suppliers without providing support or a transition period. This can lead to supplier attrition, supply chain instability, and potential legal challenges if contractual obligations are not met. It fails to acknowledge the shared responsibility for environmental stewardship and can be perceived as overly punitive rather than collaborative. Finally, an approach that ignores the issue entirely, assuming that suppliers are solely responsible for their environmental compliance, is also professionally flawed. This passive stance abdicates Wanhua Chemical's responsibility as a major player in the supply chain and leaves the company vulnerable to unforeseen regulatory changes or public scrutiny. It misses an opportunity to influence positive change and build a more robust and ethical business ecosystem. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a holistic view of the supply chain. This involves understanding the regulatory landscape, assessing the environmental impact of operations, engaging in open communication with suppliers, and developing collaborative strategies for improvement. Risk assessment, ethical considerations, and long-term sustainability should be integrated into every decision, ensuring that Wanhua Chemical operates not only profitably, but also responsibly. Question 4. During the evaluation of a potential major supply contract for Wanhua Chemical, a key clause regarding environmental compliance appears ambiguous. The potential partner has provided verbal assurances that their interpretation aligns with Wanhua Chemical's understanding, but a formal written clarification is pending and may delay the contract signing. What is the most professionally responsible course of action for the Wanhua Chemical team evaluating this contract? Option A. Seek an immediate, informal opinion from an external industry contact regarding the interpretation of such clauses, rather than waiting for formal clarification from the potential partner. Option B. Proceed with the contract based on the verbal assurances, emphasizing the urgency of securing the deal for Wanhua Chemical, and follow up on the written clarification later. Option C. Halt the contract evaluation process until a clear written clarification of the ambiguous clause is obtained and reviewed by Wanhua Chemical's legal and compliance departments. Option D. Interpret the clause in the most favorable light for Wanhua Chemical, assuming the verbal assurances are sufficient, and proceed with the contract. The correct answer is B. Proceed with the contract based on the verbal assurances, emphasizing the urgency of securing the deal for Wanhua Chemical, and follow up on the written clarification later. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the company's strategic objectives with ethical considerations and regulatory compliance. The pressure to secure a significant contract for Wanhua Chemical could lead to overlooking potential ethical compromises or misinterpretations of regulatory guidelines. Careful judgment is required to ensure that business decisions are not only profitable, but also adhere to the highest standards of integrity and legal frameworks relevant to Wanhua Chemical's operations. The correct approach involves a thorough and documented review of all contractual terms and associated regulatory requirements before committing Wanhua Chemical. This proactive stance ensures that all parties understand their obligations and that the company is not entering into agreements that could lead to future legal or reputational damage. Specifically, it aligns with principles of due diligence and responsible corporate conduct, which are implicitly expected in any hiring assessment and professional business environment. Adherence to established internal policies and external regulations is paramount. An incorrect approach that involves immediate acceptance without due diligence fails to uphold the principle of responsible risk management. It exposes Wanhua Chemical to potential breaches of contract or regulatory noncompliance, which can result in significant financial penalties, legal action, and damage to the company's reputation. Another incorrect approach, which is to proceed based on informal assurances without written confirmation, demonstrates a lack of professional rigor and reliance on potentially unreliable information. This can lead to disputes and misunderstandings, as informal agreements are often difficult to enforce and may not fully capture the nuances of regulatory obligations. Finally, an approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness, even with the intention of gaining a competitive edge, risks overlooking critical details that could have severe long-term consequences for Wanhua Chemical. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a structured process. First, identify all relevant stakeholders and their interests. Second, gather all pertinent information, including contractual documents and applicable regulations. Third, assess potential risks and benefits associated with each option. Fourth, consult with legal and compliance departments as necessary. And fifth, make a decision that is both strategically sound and ethically and legally defensible. Question 5. Risk assessment procedures indicate that Wanhua Chemical is developing a new specialty chemical for potential global distribution. To ensure responsible market entry, which of the following approaches to impact assessment is most critical for Wanhua Chemical to adopt? Option A. Focus the impact assessment primarily on the regulatory framework of Wanhua Chemical's headquarters country, assuming other markets will have similar or less stringent requirements. Option B. Delegate the entire impact assessment process to an external environmental consulting firm without establishing specific oversight mechanisms for international regulatory compliance. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that identifies and addresses the specific regulatory requirements, environmental standards, and safety guidelines of all anticipated countries of sale and manufacture. Option D. Prioritize a purely technical impact assessment based on scientific data, with regulatory compliance being a secondary consideration to be addressed post-launch. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that identifies and addresses the specific regulatory requirements, environmental standards, and safety guidelines of all anticipated countries of sale and manufacture. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Wanhua Chemical, as a global entity, must navigate complex and potentially conflicting regulatory landscapes when assessing the impact of a new chemical product. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that the impact assessment is not only comprehensive in its technical scope, but also rigorously compliant with the specific legal and ethical standards applicable to its operations and target markets. A superficial or jurisdictionally unaware assessment could lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and harm to human health or the environment. The correct approach involves a multifaceted impact assessment that explicitly considers the regulatory frameworks of all relevant jurisdictions where Wanhua Chemical intends to market or manufacture the new chemical. This includes identifying all applicable laws, regulations, and industry standards related to chemical safety, environmental protection, and product stewardship. The justification for this approach is rooted in the principle of due diligence and the legal obligation to comply with all governing laws. Specifically, it aligns with the proactive risk management principles often embedded in chemical industry regulations, which mandate thorough assessments before product introduction. Ethical considerations also demand that Wanhua Chemical prioritize safety and environmental responsibility across all its operational spheres, irrespective of the minimum legal requirements in any single jurisdiction. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the regulatory framework of Wanhua Chemical's primary country of origin, without considering the specific requirements of other markets. This fails to acknowledge the extraterritorial reach of many environmental and product safety laws, and the principle that a company is responsible for complying with the laws of the places where it operates or sells its products. Such an approach risks violating local regulations, leading to fines, product recalls, and market access denial. Another incorrect approach would be to conduct a purely technical impact assessment without integrating regulatory compliance checks. While technical data is crucial, it must be interpreted through the lens of legal requirements. For instance, chemical might be technically safe under one set of standards, but prohibited or heavily restricted under another. This oversight can lead to non-compliance and subsequent legal repercussions. A third incorrect approach would be to delegate the entire impact assessment to external consultants without establishing clear oversight and ensuring the consultants are fully briefed on Wanhua Chemical's global operational footprint and its commitment to ethical conduct. While consultants can provide expertise, ultimate responsibility for compliance rests with the company. This can lead to a fragmented or incomplete assessment that misses critical regulatory nuances. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve establishing a robust internal governance framework for risk and compliance. This framework should mandate cross-functional collaboration between legal, R&D, operations, and marketing departments. It should also include a clear process for identifying all relevant jurisdictions, researching their specific regulatory requirements, and integrating these findings into a comprehensive impact assessment. Regular training and updates on evolving regulations are also essential. The ultimate goal is to foster a culture of proactive compliance and ethical responsibility that permeates all stages of product development and market entry. Question 6. Performance analysis shows that Wanhua Chemical is considering a new hiring strategy that might involve sharing certain non-public, but not yet material information with a select group of potential candidates during the assessment process. This information relates to upcoming internal restructuring that could indirectly impact future roles. What is the most appropriate regulatory compliance approach for Wanhua Chemical to adopt in this scenario? Strictly adhering to the Wanhua Chemical Hiring Assessment Test's regulatory framework. Option A. Halt the sharing of any non-public information and seek immediate clarification from Wanhua Chemical's legal and compliance departments regarding the precise definition of material non-public information and the implications of sharing such information during the hiring process. Option B. Proceed with sharing the information, as it is not yet considered material non-public information and is intended to attract top talent. Option C. Share the information selectively with candidates who demonstrate the highest potential, believing this will give Wanhua Chemical a competitive advantage in securing them. Option D. Interpret the information as background context for the assessment, assuming that candidates will not act upon it and therefore no regulatory breach will occur. Correct answer is B. Proceed with sharing the information, as it is not yet considered material non-public information and is intended to attract top talent. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between achieving business objectives and adhering to stringent regulatory requirements. Wanhua Chemical, like any publicly traded entity, operates under a framework designed to ensure transparency, fairness, and the protection of investors. Misinterpreting or selectively applying these regulations can lead to significant legal repercussions, reputational damage, and a loss of investor confidence. The core of the challenge lies in discerning the precise scope and intent of the relevant regulations when faced with a situation that could be perceived as a loophole or an area of ambiguity. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any action taken by Wanhua Chemical is not only compliant, but also ethically sound and aligned with the spirit of the law. The correct approach involves a thorough and diligent review of the Wanhua Chemical Hiring Assessment Test's specific regulatory framework, focusing on the principles of disclosure and fair market practices. This approach prioritizes understanding the underlying intent of the regulations, which is to prevent insider trading and ensure that all material non-public information is handled appropriately. By seeking clarification from legal counsel and internal compliance departments, Wanhua Chemical demonstrates a commitment to upholding regulatory standards. This proactive stance ensures that decisions are made with a complete understanding of legal obligations and potential risks, thereby safeguarding the company's integrity and compliance posture. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with the action without seeking further clarification or legal advice is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a disregard for the potential for misinterpretation of complex regulations. Such an approach risks violating the spirit, if not the letter, of the law, leading to potential penalties. Another incorrect approach, which is to interpret the regulations in the most favorable light for immediate business gain without considering broader compliance implications, is also professionally unsound. This demonstrates a prioritization of short-term objectives over long-term regulatory adherence and ethical conduct. It can be seen as an attempt to exploit perceived ambiguities, which is often viewed unfavorably by regulatory bodies. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, identify the relevant regulatory framework and specific provisions applicable to the situation. Second, assess the potential impact of the proposed action on market integrity and investor confidence. Third, consult with internal legal and compliance experts to gain a comprehensive understanding of the regulatory landscape and potential risks. Fourth, if ambiguity persists, seek external legal counsel. Finally, document the decision-making process and the rationale behind the chosen course of action to ensure accountability and transparency. Question 7. The monitoring system demonstrates a consistent, minor fluctuation in a key process parameter at Wanhua Chemical's production facility. Which of the following represents the most appropriate approach to process optimization in this situation? Option A. Rely on historical data and operator experience to make an educated guess about the cause and implement a quick fix. Option B. Initiate a detailed root cause analysis involving cross-functional teams to understand the underlying factors contributing to the fluctuation before implementing any adjustments. Option C. Immediately adjust control settings to bring the parameter within the nominal range, assuming it's a transient anomaly. Option D. Temporarily disable the monitoring system for that parameter to avoid triggering further alerts while investigating. The correct answer is C. Immediately adjust control settings to bring the parameter within the nominal range, assuming it's a transient anomaly. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing operational efficiency with adherence to Wanhua Chemical's internal quality control protocols and potentially broader industry best practices for process optimization. The pressure to quickly resolve deviations without fully understanding their root cause can lead to superficial fixes that mask underlying issues, potentially impacting product quality, safety, or long-term operational stability. Careful judgment is required to ensure that optimization efforts are sustainable and compliant. The correct approach involves a systematic investigation to identify the root cause of the observed process deviation. This aligns with principles of continuous improvement and robust quality management systems, which are implicitly expected in a hiring assessment for a chemical company. By thoroughly analyzing the data, involving relevant technical experts, and implementing corrective actions based on the identified root cause, Wanhua Chemical can achieve genuine process optimization that is both effective and sustainable. This proactive and data-driven methodology minimizes the risk of recurring issues and ensures compliance with internal standards for process control and product integrity. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate symptom correction without root cause analysis fails to address the fundamental problem. This can lead to recurring deviations, wasted resources, and potential noncompliance with internal quality standards. Another incorrect approach, which involves bypassing established review procedures for expediency, risks compromising the integrity of the optimization process and could violate internal controls designed to ensure accuracy and safety. Finally, an approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or assumptions rather than data-driven investigation is inherently unreliable and unprofessional, potentially leading to incorrect diagnoses and ineffective solutions, thereby failing to achieve true process optimization and risking operational integrity. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding before acting. This involves 1. Acknowledging the deviation and its potential impact. 2. Initiating a structured investigation to gather data and identify the root cause. 3. Consulting with subject matter experts. 4. Developing and implementing solutions based on the root cause. 5. Verifying the effectiveness of the implemented solutions. 6. Documenting the entire process for future reference and continuous learning. This systematic approach ensures that optimization efforts are well-founded, compliant, and contribute to long-term operational excellence at Wanhua Chemical. Question 8. The assessment process reveals that a candidate for a procurement role at Wanhua Chemical has a close personal friendship with an individual who owns a key supplier company. The candidate is aware that this supplier is bidding on a significant contract with Wanhua Chemical. What is the most appropriate course of action for the candidate to ensure regulatory compliance and uphold ethical standards? Option A. Proceed with the procurement process as normal, assuming the personal friendship will not influence professional judgment. Option B. Politely decline to be involved in any aspect of the supplier's bid evaluation to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Option C. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to Wanhua Chemical's compliance department and seek guidance on managing the potential conflict of interest. Option D. End the personal friendship to eliminate any potential conflict of interest before the bid evaluation begins. The correct answer is C. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to Wanhua Chemical's compliance department and seek guidance on managing the potential conflict of interest. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a scenario where a candidate for Wanhua Chemical must navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure adherence to the company's ethical guidelines and relevant regulatory frameworks governing business conduct. This situation is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of what constitutes an acceptable business relationship versus one that could compromise integrity or create an unfair advantage. The candidate must exercise sound judgment to protect Wanhua Chemical's reputation and ensure fair competition. The correct approach involves transparently disclosing the relationship to Wanhua Chemical's compliance department and seeking guidance on how to proceed, ensuring that any potential conflict is managed according to established company policy and regulatory requirements. This demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and proactive risk management. Specifically, this aligns with principles of corporate governance and the duty of loyalty owed to an employer, which often mandate disclosure of situations that could impair independent judgment or create a perception of impropriety. Adherence to Wanhua Chemical's internal code of conduct and any applicable industry-specific regulations concerning supplier relationships would be paramount. An incorrect approach of proceeding without disclosure risks, violating Wanhua Chemical's internal policies on conflicts of interest, and could also contravene broader ethical business practices. This failure to disclose can lead to accusations of favoritism, unfair dealing, and a breach of trust, potentially resulting in disciplinary action and damage to Wanhua Chemical's business relationships. Another incorrect approach of terminating the personal relationship to avoid conflict without consulting Wanhua Chemical might be an overreaction that unnecessarily impacts personal life and doesn't necessarily resolve the underlying compliance issue if the relationship's influence is still a concern, bypasses the established channels for conflict resolution, and demonstrates a lack of understanding of how such situations are typically managed within a corporate environment. A third incorrect approach of assuming the relationship poses no conflict because it is purely personal and does not involve direct business dealings with Wanhua Chemical is a dangerous assumption. Even indirect influence or the perception of such influence can create ethical dilemmas and regulatory scrutiny, particularly in procurement or partnership decisions. This approach neglects the importance of perceived integrity and the need for transparency in business relationships. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, adherence to company policy, and consultation with the appropriate internal departments, e.g., compliance, legal, when faced with potential conflicts of interest. This framework involves identifying the potential conflict, assessing its severity, understanding relevant policies and regulations, seeking expert advice, and acting in accordance with approved procedures. Question 9. Risk assessment procedures indicate that Wanhua Chemical faces increasing scrutiny regarding its environmental footprint and community relations in its operational regions. Considering the diverse interests of shareholders, employees, and local communities, which approach best balances these stakeholder perspectives while adhering to responsible corporate governance principles. Option A. Focus primarily on maximizing short-term shareholder profits, as this is the primary fiduciary duty of management, and address environmental or community concerns only when legally mandated. Option B. Implement stringent cost-cutting measures across all departments, including those related to employee safety and environmental compliance, to enhance financial performance for shareholders. Option C. Prioritize immediate community demands for operational changes, even if they significantly disrupt production, to maintain local goodwill and avoid potential protests. Option D. Proactively integrate comprehensive environmental, social, and governance metrics into Wanhua Chemical's strategic planning and risk management, engaging all stakeholders in dialogue to identify and mitigate potential impacts and opportunities. The correct answer is D. Proactively integrate comprehensive environmental, social, and governance metrics into Wanhua Chemical's strategic planning and risk management, engaging all stakeholders in dialogue to identify and mitigate potential impacts and opportunities. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because Wanhua Chemical, as a global entity, must navigate diverse stakeholder expectations and regulatory landscapes. Balancing the immediate financial interests of shareholders with the long-term sustainability concerns of the community and the ethical obligations to employees requires careful judgment. The pressure to maintain profitability can create a conflict of interest when environmental or social responsibilities demand investment or operational changes that might impact short-term returns. The correct approach involves prioritizing a comprehensive stakeholder engagement strategy that integrates environmental, social, and governance considerations into Wanhua Chemical's core business operations and risk management framework. This aligns with the growing expectation for corporate social responsibility and the increasing regulatory focus on sustainability reporting and due diligence. By proactively identifying and addressing potential ESG risks and opportunities, Wanhua Chemical can build trust with all stakeholders, enhance its reputation, and ensure long-term value creation, which is increasingly becoming a fiduciary duty for management. This approach is ethically sound, as it recognizes the interconnectedness of business success with societal well-being and environmental health. An approach that solely focuses on maximizing short-term shareholder returns without adequate consideration for environmental impact would fail to meet evolving regulatory requirements and stakeholder expectations. Many jurisdictions are implementing stricter environmental protection laws and disclosure mandates, making such a narrow focus legally precarious and reputationally damaging. An approach that prioritizes community demands without a clear, data-driven assessment of feasibility and impact could lead to unsustainable commitments or operational disruptions. While community engagement is vital, decisions must be grounded in a balanced understanding of economic, social, and environmental factors. An approach that neglects employee well-being in favor of other stakeholder interests would violate labor laws and ethical principles regarding fair treatment and safe working conditions. This can lead to significant legal penalties, employee turnover, and damage to Wanhua Chemical's employer brand. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment that identifies all relevant stakeholders and their interests. This should be followed by a materiality assessment to determine which ESG issues are most significant to Wanhua Chemical's business and its stakeholders. Implementing robust governance mechanisms to oversee ESG performance, engaging in transparent reporting, and fostering a culture of ethical conduct are crucial steps. Professionals should adopt a long-term perspective, recognizing that sustainable business practices are not just a compliance issue, but a strategic imperative for enduring success. Question 10. Market research demonstrates a significant untapped demand for Wanhua Chemical's products in a new, emerging market. To capitalize on this opportunity swiftly, Wanhua Chemical is considering its approach to market entry. Which of the following impact assessment strategies best aligns with responsible and compliant business practices for Wanhua Chemical? Option A. Focus the impact assessment on the speed of setting up manufacturing and distribution channels, assuming regulatory compliance will be addressed reactively. Option B. Prioritize an impact assessment that solely evaluates market demand and potential pricing strategies to maximize immediate sales volume. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment focusing on understanding and adhering to the target market's environmental regulations, labor laws, and product safety standards before committing significant resources. Option D. Undertake an impact assessment that primarily analyzes competitor activities and identifies opportunities for aggressive market share acquisition. Correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment focusing on understanding and adhering to the target market's environmental regulations, labor laws, and product safety standards before committing significant resources. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire for rapid expansion and the imperative to conduct thorough due diligence, particularly when entering new markets with potentially different regulatory landscapes. Wanhua Chemical's strategic objective to expand into a new, less familiar region necessitates a careful balancing act. The challenge lies in ensuring that the pursuit of market share does not lead to the circumvention of essential compliance procedures, which could expose the company to significant legal, financial, and reputational risks. Professional judgment is required to identify and prioritize the most critical impact assessments that will inform a responsible market entry strategy. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and phased impact assessment that prioritizes regulatory compliance and stakeholder engagement. This approach is right because it aligns with the fundamental principles of responsible business conduct and the spirit of regulatory frameworks designed to protect the environment, public health, and economic stability. Specifically, it acknowledges that understanding and adhering to local environmental regulations, labor laws, and product safety standards in the new market is paramount before significant investment or operational changes are made. This proactive stance minimizes the risk of non-compliance, which can result in fines, operational disruptions, and damage to Wanhua Chemical's brand reputation. Ethical considerations also dictate that Wanhua Chemical should not operate in a manner that could harm the environment or exploit labor in the new region, regardless of the local regulatory stringency. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on market demand and competitive pricing fails to acknowledge the foundational requirement of regulatory adherence. This approach is ethically and regulatorily flawed because it prioritizes short-term commercial gains over long-term sustainability and legal obligations. It risks Wanhua Chemical engaging in practices that are illegal or harmful in the target jurisdiction, leading to severe penalties and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate operational setup without a thorough understanding of local supply chain risks is also professionally unacceptable. This neglects the potential for disruptions caused by non-compliance with local sourcing regulations, import/export laws, or ethical sourcing standards. Such an oversight can lead to supply chain breakdowns, increased costs, and legal liabilities, undermining the very expansion Wanhua Chemical seeks. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This framework should begin with identifying all relevant regulatory bodies and legal requirements in the target market. It should then involve a detailed impact assessment across various domains, including environmental, social, governance, and operational factors. Prioritization should be given to areas with the highest potential for regulatory noncompliance or significant negative impact. Stakeholder consultation, including with local authorities and community representatives, should be integrated throughout the process to ensure a holistic understanding of the operating environment. Finally, the findings of the impact assessment should directly inform the market entry strategy, ensuring that all operations are designed to be compliant and sustainable. Question 11. The control framework reveals a potential discrepancy in the waste disposal logs at a Wanhua Chemical facility, indicating a possible breach of environmental discharge regulations. What is the most appropriate immediate action for an employee who identifies this discrepancy? Option A. Attempt to manually adjust the waste disposal logs to align with expected regulatory limits without consulting superiors. Option B. Immediately report the discrepancy to the designated compliance officer or legal department. Option C. Ignore the discrepancy, assuming it is a minor oversight that will be corrected by others. Option D. Document the discrepancy in a personal notebook but take no further immediate action. The correct answer is B. Immediately report the discrepancy to the designated compliance officer or legal department. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Wanhua chemical employee tasked with ensuring compliance with the company's internal control framework, which is designed to align with relevant national and international chemical industry regulations. The challenge lies in interpreting and applying these regulations to a specific operational context, particularly when faced with a situation that could potentially lead to non-compliance if not handled correctly. The need for careful judgment arises from the potential for significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and environmental harm if regulatory requirements are not met. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves proactively identifying potential noncompliance issues and immediately escalating them through the established internal reporting channels within Wanhua Chemical. This demonstrates a commitment to regulatory adherence and ethical conduct. By reporting the observed discrepancy to the designated compliance officer or legal department, the employee ensures that the issue is addressed by those with the expertise and authority to implement corrective actions. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and the overarching goal of maintaining a robust control framework that prevents violations of chemical industry regulations, such as those pertaining to hazardous material handling and environmental discharge limits, which are critical for Wanhua Chemical's operations. Incorrect approaches analysis. Ignoring the discrepancy and hoping it resolves itself is a failure to uphold regulatory obligations and the company's control framework. This passive approach risks significant penalties and reputational damage, as it allows a potential violation to persist unchecked. It directly contravenes the proactive compliance measures expected of Wanhua Chemical employees. Attempting to rectify the issue independently without proper authorization or expertise is also a flawed approach. While well-intentioned, it could lead to further complications or an incorrect resolution that still falls short of regulatory requirements. This bypasses the established internal procedures designed to ensure accurate and compliant problem-solving, potentially creating new compliance risks for Wanhua Chemical. Documenting the issue internally but taking no further action is insufficient. While documentation is important, it does not fulfill the obligation to actively address and resolve a compliance concern. The control framework requires not just observation, but also reporting and resolution to be effective in preventing regulatory breaches. Professional reasoning. Professionals in regulated industries like chemical manufacturing must prioritize a culture of compliance. Faced with a potential regulatory issue, the decision-making process should involve 1. Recognizing the potential risk and its implications. 2. Consulting the company's internal policies and procedures, including its control framework and relevant regulatory guidelines. 3. Utilizing established reporting mechanisms to escalate the concern to the appropriate internal stakeholders, e.g., compliance department, legal counsel, or direct supervisor. 4. Cooperating fully with any subsequent investigation or corrective action. This systematic approach ensures that issues are handled transparently, effectively, and in accordance with all applicable laws and ethical standards, safeguarding both the individual and the organization. Question 12. Investigation of Wanhua Chemical's internal process for handling a significant, yet unannounced, technological breakthrough that could substantially impact its stock price. The R&D department has confirmed the breakthrough's viability, and senior management is aware of its potential market implications. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for Wanhua Chemical's leadership to ensure compliance with relevant securities regulations and maintain market integrity? Option A. Instruct relevant employees to refrain from any trading activity in Wanhua Chemical's stock until further notice, without initiating any formal disclosure process. Option B. Initiate a controlled internal review with legal and compliance teams to assess disclosure obligations and develop a plan for simultaneous public dissemination of the information. Option C. Immediately inform key institutional investors and trading desks to allow them to position their portfolios before the public announcement. Option D. Proceed with the public announcement of the breakthrough immediately, without prior internal consultation, to ensure rapid market reaction. The correct answer is C. Immediately inform key institutional investors and trading desks to allow them to position their portfolios before the public announcement. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire to secure a competitive advantage and the regulatory imperative to ensure fair market practices and prevent insider trading. Wanhua Chemical, like any publicly listed entity, operates within a strict regulatory environment designed to protect investors and maintain market integrity. The pressure to act swiftly on material non-public information, MNPI, while adhering to these regulations, requires careful judgment and a robust compliance framework. The correct approach involves a thorough internal review and consultation with legal and compliance departments before any public announcement or trading activity. This is because regulations, such as those governing disclosure of material information and insider trading, mandate that all investors receive material information simultaneously. Acting on MNPI without proper disclosure or allowing trading based on it would constitute a serious breach of these regulations, potentially leading to significant penalties for both the individuals involved and Wanhua Chemical. This approach prioritizes regulatory compliance and market fairness, safeguarding the company's reputation and legal standing. An incorrect approach would be to immediately execute trades based on the MNPI to capitalize on the anticipated market reaction. This directly violates insider trading regulations, which prohibit trading on MNPI. Another incorrect approach would be to leak the information to select external parties, such as favored analysts or investors, to give them an advantage. This also constitutes selective disclosure and a breach of fair disclosure rules. Finally, delaying the announcement indefinitely without a clear strategy for controlled disclosure, while perhaps seemingly cautious, could also be problematic if it creates an unfair information asymmetry over an extended period, especially if internal trading is occurring. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential MNPI. This should be followed by an immediate assessment of its materiality and the applicable disclosure obligations. Consultation with the legal and compliance teams is paramount to determine the appropriate course of action, which typically involves a controlled, simultaneous release of information to the market. This process ensures that all stakeholders have access to the same information, thereby upholding regulatory requirements and ethical standards. Question 13. Process analysis reveals that Wanhua Chemical has experienced a minor, contained environmental incident at one of its manufacturing facilities. Initial internal assessments suggest the environmental impact is minimal and has been fully remediated. However, there is internal discussion about how to communicate this event externally, with some advocating for a brief, positive statement focusing on the swift resolution and minimal impact, while others suggest a more detailed disclosure of the incident, including the nature of the substance involved and the remediation process, to ensure full transparency. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory expectations and ethical best practices for Wanhua Chemical? Option A. Delay external communication until all internal investigations are complete and a fully polished public relations narrative can be developed. Option B. Focus the external communication solely on the company's commitment to environmental protection and safety protocols, without directly mentioning the specific incident. Option C. Issue a brief, positive statement highlighting the swift resolution and minimal environmental impact, without detailing the specific substance or remediation process. Option D. Provide a comprehensive disclosure to relevant regulatory bodies and the public, detailing the incident, the substance involved, the remediation steps taken, and any potential residual impacts, even if deemed minimal. The correct answer is C. Issue a brief, positive statement highlighting the swift resolution and minimal environmental impact, without detailing the specific substance or remediation process. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire for positive public relations and the ethical obligation to disclose potentially material information accurately and transparently. Wanhua Chemical, as a publicly traded entity, is subject to regulations that mandate fair disclosure and prohibit misleading statements. The pressure to manage public perception, especially concerning environmental incidents, can tempt individuals to downplay or omit critical details. Careful judgment is required to navigate this tension and prioritize regulatory compliance and ethical conduct over short-term reputational gains. The correct approach involves a commitment to full and accurate disclosure, even if it carries short-term negative implications. This means reporting the incident to the relevant authorities promptly and providing a comprehensive, truthful account to the public and stakeholders. This aligns with the principles of corporate responsibility and transparency, which are often underpinned by regulatory frameworks designed to protect investors and the public. Specifically, regulations governing environmental reporting and financial disclosure would likely mandate such transparency. By acting with integrity, Wanhua Chemical upholds its legal and ethical duties, fostering long-term trust and mitigating the risk of more severe penalties for non-disclosure or misrepresentation. An incorrect approach would be to selectively disclose information or to frame the incident in a way that minimizes its severity without providing a complete picture. This could involve omitting details about the extent of the environmental impact or the potential long-term consequences. Such an approach would likely violate regulations requiring accurate reporting of material events and could be considered misleading to investors and the public. Ethically, it represents a failure to uphold the principle of honesty and transparency. Another incorrect approach would be to delay reporting the incident or to attempt to contain the information internally without proper external notification. This could lead to regulatory noncompliance, fines, and further damage to the company's reputation if the incident is discovered through other channels. It also demonstrates a lack of accountability and a disregard for the public's right to know about potential environmental risks. A third incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the positive aspects of the company's response without acknowledging the incident itself or its impact. While highlighting remediation efforts is important, it should not come at the expense of a truthful and complete account of what occurred. This selective communication can be perceived as deceptive and erode stakeholder confidence. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical considerations and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Identifying the core ethical and legal obligations. 2. Assessing the potential impact of different courses of action on all stakeholders. 3. Consulting relevant internal policies and external regulations. 4. Seeking guidance from legal and compliance departments. 5. Choosing the option that upholds transparency, accuracy, and accountability, even if it presents short-term challenges. Question 14. System analysis indicates that Wanhua Chemical is preparing to launch a new chemical product. To ensure a responsible and compliant market entry, what is the most appropriate approach for assessing the potential impact of this launch? Option A. Prioritize the assessment of market demand and competitive advantages, with only a cursory review of potential regulatory implications to expedite the launch. Option B. Utilize anecdotal evidence from previous product launches and assume that past practices adequately address the regulatory considerations for this new chemical. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that explicitly identifies and evaluates all relevant regulatory requirements, potential EHS risks, and necessary control measures for the new product. Option D. Focus on the speed to market by implementing a streamlined impact assessment that relies on general EHS guidelines and assumes existing controls are sufficient. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that explicitly identifies and evaluates all relevant regulatory requirements, potential EHS risks, and necessary control measures for the new product. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Wanhua Chemical employees by requiring them to navigate potential conflicts between business objectives and regulatory compliance when assessing the impact of a new product launch. The pressure to achieve market success can create an environment where shortcuts or incomplete assessments might be considered. Therefore, a rigorous and compliant approach to impact assessment is crucial to avoid legal repercussions, reputational damage, and potential harm. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and documented impact assessment that explicitly considers all relevant regulatory requirements for Wanhua Chemical's operations. This includes identifying potential environmental, health, and safety (AS) risks associated with the new product, evaluating the adequacy of existing control measures, and determining if new or enhanced controls are necessary to meet or exceed regulatory standards. This approach ensures that Wanhua Chemical acts proactively to mitigate risks and maintain compliance with applicable laws and guidelines, thereby protecting its stakeholders and its business. Incorrect approach is analysis, focusing solely on market demand and competitive advantage without a thorough regulatory impact assessment is an incorrect approach. This failure to prioritize compliance can lead to violations of EHS regulations, resulting in fines, operational shutdowns, and significant reputational damage. prioritizing speed to market over a detailed risk analysis, even if some preliminary EHS checks are done, is also incorrect. This approach neglects the potential for unforeseen risks that could arise from a less than exhaustive assessment, potentially leading to incidents that could have been prevented with more thorough due diligence. Relying on anecdotal evidence or past practices for similar products without a specific assessment for the new product is another incorrect approach. Regulatory requirements can evolve, and product-specific characteristics may introduce new risks. This reliance on outdated or generalized information can lead to non-compliance and potential safety failures. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Wanhua Chemical should adopt a systematic decision-making process that begins with understanding the full scope of the project and its potential impacts. This involves proactively identifying all applicable regulatory frameworks and guidelines relevant to the product's lifecycle. The next step is to conduct a thorough impact assessment, documenting all findings, risk evaluations, and proposed mitigation strategies. This assessment should be reviewed by relevant EHS and legal departments before proceeding. Transparency and a commitment to compliance, even when it presents challenges to business timelines, are paramount. Question 15. When evaluating the appropriateness of accepting a gift from a key supplier during a business meeting, what is the most responsible course of action for a Wanhua Chemical employee to take, considering potential conflicts of interest and company policy? Option A. Strictly adhere to Wanhua Chemical's established gift policy, reporting any accepted gifts as required and declining those that exceed policy limits or could create an appearance of impropriety. Option B. Accept the gift if it is not overtly illegal, assuming that such gestures are standard business courtesies. Option C. Politely accept the gift and keep it discreetly, without informing management or the compliance department. Option D. Assume that any gift from a supplier is acceptable as long as it is not a direct bribe. The correct answer is A. Strictly adhere to Wanhua Chemical's established gift policy, reporting any accepted gifts as required and declining those that exceed policy limits or could create an appearance of impropriety. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Wanhua Chemical employees regarding the ethical and regulatory implications of accepting gifts from suppliers. The core difficulty lies in balancing normal business courtesies with the potential for undue influence or the appearance of impropriety, which can undermine trust and fair dealing. Navigating this requires a nuanced understanding of Wanhua Chemical's internal policies and relevant ethical guidelines to ensure compliance and maintain professional integrity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves Wanhua Chemical employees strictly adhering to the company's established gift policy, which likely outlines clear thresholds for acceptable gift values and specifies reporting procedures for any gifts received. This approach is right because it directly addresses the potential for conflicts of interest and ensures transparency. By following the policy, employees demonstrate a commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory compliance, preventing situations that could be perceived as bribery or favoritism. This aligns with general principles of corporate governance and ethical business practices, which are often reinforced by specific industry regulations and internal codes of conduct designed to prevent corruption and maintain a level playing field. Incorrect approaches analysis. Accepting a gift without considering its value or reporting it to management is an incorrect approach. This failure bypasses Wanhua Chemical's internal controls and creates a significant risk of violating ethical standards and potentially anti-bribery regulations. It can lead to an appearance of impropriety, even if no explicit quid pro quo was intended. Assuming that any gift from a supplier is acceptable as long as it is not overtly illegal is also an incorrect approach. This overlooks the importance of Wanhua Chemical's specific policies, which are designed to go beyond minimum legal requirements to foster a culture of integrity. Ethical considerations and the perception of fairness are paramount, and a gift that is technically legal might still create an unacceptable conflict of interest or compromise professional judgment. Seeking to conceal the acceptance of a gift from Wanhua Chemical's compliance department or management is a severely incorrect approach. This action constitutes a direct violation of internal policies and potentially legal reporting requirements. It suggests an intent to circumvent established procedures and indicates a lack of integrity, which can have serious repercussions for both the individual and the company. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Wanhua Chemical should adopt a proactive and policy-driven approach. When faced with a potential gift, the first step should always be to consult Wanhua Chemical's most current gift and entertainment policy. If the gift falls within acceptable parameters and reporting requirements, it should be documented. If there is any doubt about the appropriateness, value, or potential for conflict of interest, the gift should be politely declined or escalated to the appropriate compliance officer or manager for guidance. This systematic process ensures that decisions are made with full awareness of Wanhua Chemical's ethical standards and regulatory obligations, prioritizing transparency and integrity in all business dealings. Question 16. Quality control measures reveal a potential deviation in the purity of a key intermediate chemical used in the production of a new polymer at Wanhua Chemical's manufacturing facility. The deviation, while currently within the broader acceptable range, is trending towards the lower limit and has been observed in multiple batches over the past week. The production team is under pressure to meet a significant customer order deadline. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Wanhua Chemical Quality Assurance Manager? Option A. Continue production as normal to meet the customer deadline, but instruct the production team to monitor the purity levels more closely and address any further deviations if they occur. Option B. Inform the sales department to inform the customer about the potential purity issue and suggest a delay in shipment until the matter is resolved. Option C. Immediately halt production of the affected intermediate. Initiate a full root cause analysis according to Wanhua Chemical's standard operating procedures, and quarantine all batches produced since the trend was first observed pending further testing and investigation. Option D. Issue a minor adjustment to the production process parameters without a formal investigation, assuming the trend is within acceptable operational variability. The correct answer is C. Immediately halt production of the affected intermediate. Initiate a full root cause analysis according to Wanhua Chemical's standard operating procedures, and quarantine all batches produced since the trend was first observed pending further testing and investigation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need to address a potential product defect with the company's obligations under Wanhua Chemical's internal quality assurance policies and relevant regulatory frameworks. The pressure to act quickly must be tempered by a thorough, documented investigation to ensure that any corrective actions are appropriate, effective, and compliant. Missteps could lead to reputational damage, regulatory penalties, and compromised product safety. The correct approach involves a systematic, documented investigation that adheres strictly to Wanhua Chemical's established quality control protocols and any applicable industry standards or regulations. This ensures that the root cause of the defect is identified, the scope of the issue is accurately assessed, and corrective and preventative actions are implemented in a controlled manner. This methodical process is crucial for maintaining product integrity, demonstrating due diligence to regulatory bodies, and upholding Wanhua Chemical's commitment to quality and safety. An incorrect approach that involves immediate, undocumented recall without a thorough investigation fails to identify the root cause, potentially leading to unnecessary costs and disruption. It also bypasses established procedures, which could be a violation of internal Wanhua Chemical policies and potentially regulatory requirements for product recall management. Another incorrect approach, which is to dismiss the findings without further verification, is professionally unacceptable as it disregards potential product safety issues and violates the fundamental principles of quality control. This could lead to the release of defective products, resulting in severe consequences for consumers and Wanhua Chemical, including legal liabilities and significant reputational damage. It also undermines the integrity of the quality control system itself. A third incorrect approach, which is to implement a superficial fix without understanding the underlying problem, risks the defect recurring. This demonstrates a lack of commitment to root cause analysis and continuous improvement, which are core tenets of effective quality management systems and are often implicitly or explicitly required by regulatory oversight. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established procedures, thorough investigation, and data-driven decision-making. This involves 1. Acknowledging and documenting the reported issue. 2. Initiating the defined investigation process as per Wanhua Chemical's Quality Control Manual. 3. Engaging relevant internal stakeholders, e.g., R&D, production, quality assurance. 4. evaluating findings against established quality standards and regulatory requirements. 5. Developing and implementing a corrective and preventative action plan based on the investigation's conclusions. 6. Documenting all steps and decisions meticulously. Question 17. Analysis of how Wanhua Chemical should communicate its proactive environmental initiatives to the public and investors, given that the company is currently undergoing an environmental impact investigation by regulatory authorities, which has not yet concluded. Option A. Emphasize Wanhua Chemical's ongoing investments in green technology and sustainability efforts, while acknowledging the existence of the investigation in a general statement, without detailing potential risks or timelines. Option B. Focus solely on the positive environmental achievements and future sustainability goals of Wanhua Chemical, omitting any mention of the ongoing regulatory investigation to avoid negative public perception. Option C. Publicly disclose Wanhua Chemical's proactive environmental initiatives, acknowledge the ongoing regulatory investigation, and provide a balanced overview of potential implications and the company's commitment to full cooperation and transparency. Option D. Issue a statement from Wanhua Chemical that dismisses the environmental investigation as a routine procedural matter with no significant implications, while simultaneously highlighting environmental successes. The correct answer is A. Emphasize Wanhua Chemical's ongoing investments in green technology and sustainability efforts, while acknowledging the existence of the investigation in a general statement without detailing potential risks or timelines. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire for positive public relations and the ethical obligation to disclose potentially material information accurately and transparently. Wanhua Chemical, as a publicly traded entity, is subject to regulations that mandate fair disclosure and prohibit misleading statements. The pressure to present a favorable image can tempt individuals to downplay or omit negative aspects, creating an ethical dilemma that requires careful navigation. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and accuracy in all communications, even when it might be less favorable in the short term. This means acknowledging the potential environmental concerns and the ongoing investigation without exaggeration or minimization. This aligns with the ethical principles of honesty and integrity, and crucially, with regulatory requirements that demand truthful and complete disclosure of material information to stakeholders, including investors and the public. Failing to do so could lead to regulatory penalties, loss of investor confidence, and reputational damage. An incorrect approach would be to selectively highlight only the positive aspects of Wanhua Chemical's environmental initiatives, while omitting or downplaying the existence of the investigation and its potential implications. This constitutes a failure of transparency and could be interpreted as misleading stakeholders, violating ethical duties of honesty and potentially breaching regulations concerning accurate financial and operational reporting. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the investigation entirely without proper due diligence, or to provide speculative assurances about its outcome without factual basis. This demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility and a disregard for the potential impact on the company's reputation and legal standing. Professionals facing similar situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Identifying the core ethical and regulatory obligations. 2. Gathering all relevant facts objectively. 3. Assessing the potential impact of different communication strategies on stakeholders and the company. 4. Consulting with legal and compliance departments when in doubt. 5. Choosing the approach that upholds transparency, accuracy, and integrity, even if it presents short-term challenges. Question 18. The efficiency study reveals that Wanhua Chemical's current batch processing method for a key intermediate product is time-consuming and resource-intensive. To accelerate production and reduce operational costs, a proposal has been put forth to adopt a continuous flow manufacturing system. However, this new system would require significant modifications to the existing waste treatment infrastructure and potentially alter the emission profile of the plant. Which of the following represents the most responsible and compliant approach for Wanhua Chemical to consider when evaluating this proposal? Option A. Focus on optimizing the existing batch processing method through minor adjustments as this avoids the complexity and potential regulatory hurdles associated with introducing a completely new manufacturing system. Option B. Prioritize the cost savings associated with the continuous flow system and implement it quickly, addressing any potential regulatory issues only if they are identified by external auditors or enforcement agencies. Option C. Conduct a thorough assessment of the continuous flow system's environmental impact, safety protocols, and regulatory compliance requirements, including obtaining any necessary permits or approvals, before committing to its implementation. Option D. Immediately proceed with the adoption of the continuous flow system, assuming that any necessary regulatory adjustments can be made retrospectively once the system is operational and efficiency gains are realized. The correct answer is D. Immediately proceed with the adoption of the continuous flow system, assuming that any necessary regulatory adjustments can be made retrospectively once the system is operational and efficiency gains are realized. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires Wanhua Chemical to balance the pursuit of operational efficiency with its ethical and regulatory obligations. The pressure to improve performance can sometimes lead to shortcuts or overlooking critical compliance aspects. Careful judgment is required to ensure that efficiency gains do not compromise safety, environmental standards, or fair labor practices, all of which are subject to stringent regulations. The correct approach, which involves a comprehensive review of existing processes and potential improvements, while prioritizing compliance with Wanhua Chemical's internal policies and relevant industry regulations, represents best professional practice. This is because it embeds a proactive and responsible mindset. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing chemical manufacturing and environmental protection, mandate adherence to specific standards for safety, emissions, and waste management. Ethically, Wanhua Chemical has a responsibility to its employees, the community, and the environment to operate safely and sustainably. This approach ensures that any proposed efficiency measures are vetted against these critical requirements, preventing potential legal repercussions, reputational damage, and harm. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering the regulatory implications would fail, because it disregards the legal mandates that Wanhua Chemical must follow. For instance, implementing a new, cheaper chemical process without assessing its environmental impact or obtaining necessary permits would violate environmental protection laws. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of implementation over thorough risk assessment would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to accidents or incidents that have severe safety and legal consequences, directly contravening occupational health and safety regulations. A third incorrect approach that involves bypassing established quality control procedures to speed up production would undermine product integrity and potentially violate consumer protection laws or industry-specific quality standards, leading to product recalls or liability issues. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the full scope of the problem and its potential impacts. This involves identifying all relevant stakeholders and their concerns, thoroughly researching applicable regulations and internal policies, and evaluating potential solutions against these criteria. A structured risk assessment process, followed by a cost-benefit analysis that explicitly includes compliance costs and potential liabilities, is crucial. Finally, seeking input from legal, compliance, and relevant operational departments ensures that decisions are well-informed and defensible. Question 19. Stakeholder feedback indicates that a recent operational disruption at a Wanhua chemical manufacturing facility, while currently contained, may have implications for future production output. The feedback suggests a need for clearer communication regarding the potential impact on supply chains and financial forecasts. Option A. Conduct a thorough internal assessment with legal and compliance teams to determine the materiality of the disruption and its disclosure requirements before communicating with stakeholders. Option B. Provide a vague statement to stakeholders acknowledging a minor operational issue that has been resolved, without detailing potential future implications. Option C. Immediately issue a public statement detailing the full extent of the operational disruption, including all potential future impacts, to ensure maximum transparency. Option D. Acknowledge the feedback internally but decide not to communicate externally, assuming the issue will resolve without significant impact. Correct answer is C. Immediately issue a public statement detailing the full extent of the operational disruption, including all potential future impacts, to ensure maximum transparency. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between business objectives and regulatory compliance, particularly concerning the disclosure of potentially sensitive information. Wanhua Chemical, like any publicly traded entity, operates under strict regulatory frameworks that mandate transparency while also protecting proprietary information. The challenge lies in balancing these competing interests to ensure accurate stakeholder communication without jeopardizing competitive advantage or violating disclosure rules. Careful judgment is required to interpret the nuances of regulatory requirements and to communicate effectively and ethically. The correct approach involves a thorough internal review process that prioritizes regulatory adherence and factual accuracy. This entails consulting with legal and compliance departments to understand the specific disclosure obligations related to the identified operational issue. The aim is to provide stakeholders with material information that is both accurate and compliant with all applicable regulations, such as those governing financial reporting and corporate disclosures. This approach upholds the principles of transparency and accountability, fostering trust with investors and other stakeholders. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss stakeholder feedback without proper investigation, as this fails to acknowledge potential material issues that require disclosure. This could lead to regulatory penalties and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach is to disclose information prematurely or without proper verification, which could result in misleading stakeholders or violating confidentiality agreements. Furthermore, attempting to obscure or downplay a significant operational issue to avoid negative perception, without a clear regulatory basis for such omission, constitutes a failure in ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with acknowledging and investigating all stakeholder feedback. This should be followed by a rigorous assessment against relevant regulatory requirements, consulting with internal experts, legal, compliance, finance, to determine the appropriate course of action. Transparency, accuracy, and adherence to the spirit and letter of regulations should guide all communication strategies. Question 20. Research into the development of a new biodegradable polymer by Wanhua Chemical has identified a potential, albeit low, risk of trace chemical leaching during the decomposition process. The R&D team is eager to proceed to market due to significant competitive pressure. Which of the following represents the most professionally responsible approach for Wanhua Chemical? Option A. Halt the product development until extensive, long-term studies can definitively prove zero leaching under all conceivable conditions, even if it means losing market share. Option B. Proceed with the product launch immediately, as the risk is deemed low and the competitive advantage is critical. Option C. Conduct a thorough risk assessment, develop mitigation strategies for the leaching, and engage with relevant regulatory bodies to ensure compliance and transparency before market launch. Option D. Launch the product and address any potential leaching issues reactively if they arise and are reported. The correct answer is B. Proceed with the product launch immediately, as the risk is deemed low and the competitive advantage is critical. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Wanhua Chemical employees due to the inherent conflict between achieving business objectives and adhering to stringent regulatory compliance, particularly concerning environmental protection and product safety. The pressure to innovate and bring new products to market quickly can create a temptation to overlook or downplay potential risks, making careful judgment and a robust ethical framework paramount. The correct approach involves a proactive and comprehensive risk assessment process that integrates regulatory requirements from the outset of product development. This means not only identifying potential environmental impacts and safety concerns, but also actively seeking to mitigate them through design changes, rigorous testing, and transparent communication with regulatory bodies. This approach aligns with the principles of responsible corporate citizenship and the legal obligations imposed by environmental and product safety regulations, ensuring that Wanhua Chemical operates within the bounds of the law and maintains public trust. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed to market over thorough risk assessment would fail to adequately identify and address potential environmental hazards or product safety issues. This could lead to noncompliance with regulations, resulting in significant fines, reputational damage, and potential harm to consumers or the environment. Another incorrect approach, which involves delaying the disclosure of potential risks until they become undeniable problems, demonstrates a lack of transparency and a failure to uphold ethical standards. This reactive stance can exacerbate the consequences of noncompliance and erode stakeholder confidence. Finally, an approach that seeks to find loopholes or interpret regulations in the most lenient way possible, rather than striving for genuine compliance, undermines the spirit of the law and can lead to unintended negative outcomes. Professionals at Wanhua Chemical should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of all applicable regulations. This should be followed by a systematic evaluation of potential risks associated with new product development, engaging relevant internal and external experts. Decisions should then be made based on a clear assessment of compliance, safety, and ethical considerations, with a preference for approaches that exceed minimum regulatory requirements to ensure long-term sustainability and responsible business practices.